Welcome to Superstitions and Traditions. I'm Kristen.
And I'm Trish.
This is our podcast about history and the good, the bad, and the shenanigans that are entertaining. And today we're going to talk about some good.
Oh yes, I love today's. It's going to be exciting.
So today is Point of View Historical Edition. We are going to talk about the 6Triple8s. They were a battalion of African American women who served during World War II overseas.
I bet that was not an easy task for them back in those days.
You know, I'm thinking it wasn't, but they rocked it hard and did some good work. All right, well, I knew I wanted to help with the war effort. I wanted to serve my country, though it rarely serves me. We were all worried about our men overseas. We had no idea how low the morale of our heroes overseas really was. Thanks to the support of the First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune was able to convince the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps to accept black women into service. Our white counterparts were slowly called up to serve, but we weren't. Civil rights groups pressed the War Department on our behalf, and in November of 1944, they sent for us and we responded. An all-black WAC battalion with 855 women responding, 31 of whom were officers. 6Triple8s Battalion. Central Postal Directory Battalion. Under the command of Major Charity Adams. We had trained for battle, but were regulated to support duties. We sailed to Scotland knowing there were German U-boats and were met with an explosion of German V-1 rockets exploding when we landed. Once we were safe, we traveled to our assigned duties. Birmingham, England, our post, was a disaster. No heat, minimal light, rats, and mail for our soldiers stacked floor to ceiling. After our initial shock, we got to work. First with cleaning and organizing our surroundings, then with our job, getting the letters and care packages to our fighters. We used our battle cry, no mail, low morale, to rally us. We were given a deadline of 6 months to get the Postal Service under control. We completed it in half the time. We started an efficient system, we boosted morale, and we helped our brothers and sisters in uniform. Despite the segregation still in place, even overseas in the service, and despite the discrimination we faced, we helped black and whites as equals.
World War II, right? 1942, I think, is when the Civilians Corps, the
Women's Corps
was created. So they created the Women's Civilian Corps. Eleanor Roosevelt instrumental, along with Mary Jane McLeod Bethune, who in herself was an amazing woman.
She was.
She started her own college, correct? And was born like in 1875 in, I think, South Carolina.
She was one of 17.
One of 17
children.
17 children. Her parents, both parents, I believe, were African American slaves, correct? She was able to go to college, correct?
Yeah, she went to college. She started a college to educate African Americans because of the segregation and discrimination they faced. She just changed the world.
Oh, she did. She was a teacher. You know, I'm kind of partial to teachers.
You are. I am too.
You know, and
being raised by a tribe of teachers.
Yes. And then just did amazing works for African American women during that time.
Yeah. And then when, in 1942, like you said, the Women's Army Corps was created. Franklin Roosevelt was the Roosevelt president at the time of World War II. He put an advocate, he gave a voice to African American people inside the War Department.
Right.
He created a division to focus on assisting African Americans within the military.
Yes, and Eleanor was very much involved in
She
that.
was very much involved in women's rights and civil rights.
Right.
Yes.
we look at Mary Jane, who at that time was just a champion for racial and gender equality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she started the college, where she's working with Eleanor, and they say,
well, her college, it was it was like a kind of like a VOTech kind of, where she would help them specialize in trades, specific trades.
Yes, to help find their place in the workforce,
yes,
and to find a trade where they could be successful. And she was an advisor to President Roosevelt
yes,
during the time. Okay. And she and Eleanor were good friends,
yes,
because of the closeness and all of the advocacy that she'd worked together. So when they started the Women American Corps, it was, just like, hey,
I mean,
she's going to be our advocate.
How good would that be to be able to pick up the phone and call the First Lady and say, thank you for your work here, but you know who was left out. Yes. Can you help us?
Can you help us? Yes. Leader of the unofficial Black Cabinet for FDR as well.
Yes.
So she is very much involved in African American women's rights at this time, and women's rights. So next step.
So they trained in the military. They did the army crawl on their bellies, and they were trained to be soldiers. However, at this time, women weren't soldiers. They had support roles where, they were
allowed to do clerical duties and other duties, health duties, clerical duties, those kind of things.
This was a big one. And the phone.
Yes.
Telephones was another big one that specifically the military wanted women to do.
Right.
And not necessarily because of clerical things, but because they figured out real quick that women were more efficient with things like this.
Yes.
So, these two, the mail and the phones, those two specifically, they figured out real fast, we need women.
Yes.
We need women over here handling this business for us because men can't handle it right.
Right. So the Women's Army Corps, right, which was born out of the Auxiliary Corps, which was non-military. So the Women's Army Corps became military.
Which sadly took years.
Yes.
For them to finally be recognized as military service.
Yes, it did take years.
They had none of the benefits that service men and women get, or service men got after military.
No.
I mean, they were
didn't
not
receive the benefits when they get back. They didn't receive thank yous.
They moved up in rank.
They did all the training. They worked with they knew how to do all of the stuff with the guns and all of the training, combat training. They did all of that.
It took decades for government to finally look at them and say, yes, you were in the military. But anyway, that was just a side piece. It really had nothing to do with us right now.
I know. Okay. All right, so here we are. We're stateside, right? So we do have a group. They've started the Women's Army Corps. They're looking for the best of the best.
The best of the best? Yes.
Okay, so they start, they have an all-black
battalion,
all-black battalion,
and a white battalion.
Okay, so as we're looking at the war, then all of the others are being called into service, correct?
The white battalions are being called up, primarily for phones at this time, because they still weren't real worried about mail.
No.
But the phone service, we're talking the old time switchboards, pull the cord, stick it in the nuts.
I'm going to say one ringy dingy, two ringy dingy, and I'm sorry, that's an old skit. Never mind.
Okay.
So you don't even know that.
I don't even know that one.
All right. Okay. So,
but that was the first major we've got to have a woman, because it's a tight little thing, and they can move faster, and so they call up women, and they took the white women.
So meanwhile, you have this
fully trained, ready to go battalion
members with 31 highly trained officers and enlisted personnel who are ready to serve.
Who are ready to go.
Ready to serve. They've worked. They've gone through the training. They are led by Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams.
Yes.
At the end.
By the time it was over.
It was over.
When they first went, she was a major.
Right. And
that woman worked. She earned her rank.
Oh, she did. And she
came up with the battle cry. She's the one who walked in, and It was a warehouse. It was a warehouse. The windows had been blacked out for privacy and sensitive information. So there was very little light. They got there in the wintertime. It is cold. It is November.
Was their trip over there pretty?
No.
Okay.
So they sailed. There were German U-boats in the water. They sailed into Scotland first. So they get to Scotland. Their trip there was fairly safe. When they get to Scotland, there are active bombs falling. So they get off their boats, make it into where they're going, and have to run for cover immediately.
Immediately because of the bombs.
So kind of held them up a bit. They are on their way to Birmingham, England, to this warehouse. They finally make it there. They walk into the warehouse. There are packages floor to ceiling. 2 to 3 years worth of mail and care packages from families just stacked up.
So World War II, I mean, just imagine the fighting and everything. No cell phone, no Facebook, all of that. There's no way to communicate except for mail. And the mail's not being delivered. The morale for the troops is extremely low. Families stateside
are worried and panicked, and
because they haven't heard anything from what's happening with their loved ones that are in the services. So they bring up the 6Triple8s to help solve this. Did they bring them up with the thought that they could really fix this? Or was
I think they did.
Okay.
I think just like with the phones, they brought them in, not necessarily, maybe not thinking they're going to solve this problem, but thinking they're going to be able to make a dent. They're going to be able to offer something that we can't.
Right. At least they'll do a little bit.
They gave them a 6-month deadline, and those women got to work. First, they cleaned, they organized.
I love that part first because they were in deplorable conditions.
Yes. There was no heat in this warehouse. There was minimal electricity.
Right.
Minimal lighting.
The rats
had overtaken it. Care packages had been eaten. There were food and stuff sent.
No heat. I mean, we're in the frigid part of winter and there's no heat. They're wearing long johns and coats and they're trying to get everything.
Lieutenant Colonel Adams. One of the first things she did was, we're going to have to work around the clock. We're not going to be able to stop. So she designated 8-hour blocks of time.
Okay.
And did a third rotation. You worked your 8 hours. A third of the battalion worked 8 hours. They went home, they went to bed, they had their off time, but they kept 8-hour shifts running. So that's 7 days a week.
7 days a week, 24/7 to try to get that mail out to help increase morale.
Yes. One of the biggest problems they had was, so this is the Second World War, but we're still addresses and all of this stuff.
Right, especially over there.
Yeah, especially over there. One of the biggest problems they ran into was 15 soldiers with the same name, but no
It's like just
markers.
Addressed to. Yes. How do you find them?
And they did. I don't know how, but they somehow followed where they were from, and
so they had to go through like 7 million information cards, correct? And
find the identifying markers to match these soldiers with where they were and who they were, and make sure they had the right person.
Plus, then you have them, and they're moving. I mean, because the battalions don't stay in place, so they would move from one place to another. So then you have to find records once you've even found out. I mean, it's insurmountable, which is why all the mail just sat for years in the warehouse, because there was no way of system.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
And so she got this done. They repackaged like the packages that had been eaten with food and things in it that had been eaten by the rats. They took the time to repackage that, get rid of the stuff that was no good, but keep as much of it as possible
in the way that only a woman could do. Get that package, get that care package ready, get it sent back up. I love that.
And got it to the right person. Sometimes 3 years later, 3 years after Mama sent it to them,
it's going to make sure your Mama sent that. We're going to make sure you get that. Still, even during that time, though, the conditions that they lived in were much different than the condition of their other counterparts. But that's when they took the time to do all of those things. The rec rooms were different, but I love
their barracks, and they were still segregated.
Yes.
As a matter, not only, so they did their thing in Birmingham.
Okay.
In England. After they finished there and got that one going, okay, we got to move you because they had another one in France. And then they went to several different countries. And did this. They had their little leave time and were set up in segregated hotels. They had, in France specifically, they had set up a hotel for these women, this battalion, to come in. Completely segregated, strictly black women. And she looked at her soldiers and said, we're not staying there. And made arrangement for her battalion to stay with other soldiers.
Oh, good for her.
She was a fierce advocate for not only the male, but she took care of her women.
Oh, yes, she did. Yes, she did.
There were social activities happening around as well. And so they received an invitation to play on this basketball team.
Oh, really?
Not knowing that these were black women. So they show up to play. And were told, never mind, we made a mistake. So she started her own basketball team.
Good for her.
And they won whatever little championship thing they had.
I love that.
So I thought that was cool.
Oh, that is cool. That is
like, okay, cool. Fine, you don't want to play with us?
Well, we'll do our own thing.
We can't be on your team, we will beat you.
That's right.
And that's what they did.
And she also, they thought of everything. Hair salons that so here they are, not only just, kicking ass in the basketball court, which I love that.
And the mailroom.
Coach. And the mailroom.
I knew you would like that. That's why I remembered the basketball story. I knew you'd love it as coach.
That. And, these women in a foreign country are
in France, specifically outside of the military. The U.S. War Department sent a letter to the French soldiers that when they had sent a black male battalion of fighters, of frontline fighters, to fight alongside the French. Our War Department sent a letter to the French War Department saying, you don't want to interact with them. You want to make sure you keep them separate. They're, blah, blah, blah. Telling them basically how we're segregated here. You want to make sure you stay that way there. Right. And France was like, thanks for the advice. No, no, we're not going to do that. But thank you for playing. And so they were welcomed by the white French soldiers, probably for the first time ever in their lives.
Oh my goodness.
Welcomed by white.
The Birmingham residents loved them.
Oh yeah.
They would invite them over to their homes for tea. They would go watch them work because, here's just this mass chaos from what had been and then the order that they brought to it. And they were just, they were embraced.
And then the same thing happened in France. They were, with the French population, general population, they were welcomed and embraced. And
then we go to the famous encounter. Do you remember? So at one encounter that they had, here they are out there. Everybody, foreigners are embracing us. They're being well respected. They're doing all of this, doing exemplary work, right? But then it's time for an inspection. So the Army, so the Army's going to come and do an inspection, which leads to my favorite quote of all times.
They walked in and there were only a third of them.
Yes.
That were ready and met whatever their standards, their quartered, tucked, whatever, in their little sleeping areas. And he asks, or she, or who, I can't remember if it's a male or female officers, asked Lieutenant Colonel Adams, where's the rest of your battalion? She said, they're sleeping. That was not acceptable. And tells them, I'm going to send a white person over here to show you how to do this. And then she said, what is this quote?
Ready? She never broke protocol when she spoke these words. Over my dead body, sir.
Yep.
And can you just imagine for her at that time to speak those words in courage, encourage to that white general who was saying, she's like, oh no, we've got this. You don't need to send somebody else over here to show me how to do my job.
I don't think they were aware that they weren't technically military and weren't going to receive any of the benefits.
Right.
Because they fought afterwards, both the white women battalions and the black women battalions. I would have been like, piss off, dude. I'm not in the military.
That's That's right. Well, then they sent in a chaplain, right?
Uh-huh.
So they sent in the chaplain after the incident because we're going to get this all figured out. We can't be having this, and that's right, too. They had to report to him for counseling, and they were absent gladly because they were at the counseling. And so then you have like even black and white servicemen then at this time are beginning to get like, why do you keep treating them like this? I mean, they are doing everything they can to keep morale up. They've gone above and beyond. They've settled these male problems at different places. What on earth is going on? Despite all of this going on, they still averaged, their tracking system allowed them to process an average of 65,000 pieces of mail per shift. So that's every 8 hours, 65,000. So the backlog, as you said earlier, was gone in 3 months. Okay. And then their battle cry.
No mail, low morale.
1945, 3 members of the battalion were killed in a Jeep accident, I believe. But the military would not even pay for them to be buried.
They didn't get military funeral.
The women had to
honors. Yeah, they had to jump in together and bury them. And in France.
Yeah, they're buried in the Normandy American Cemetery.
Yeah.
With their sisters.
Oh yeah, you've got that. Normandy American Cemetery there in France. Yeah.
That the sisters paid for their family, their sisters, their family.
The battalion.
The battalion. So that they could be laid to rest with honors, according, not recognized obviously by the military. So.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine sending them over there and then, well, that sucks. Look what happened. And just going on about your business.
And I mean,
we'll move on from that.
Yes, I'm still at a loss of words for that. Okay, so then, the war ends and
they come home.
They come home to a big.
They come home.
I bet there's a big military fanfare there waiting for them to receive them as they.
But no, there was no fanfare. There was no even really acknowledgement for their service when they came home. And that happened to black and white women alike. That happened to women
and
native
in the military.
Yeah.
So that
happened to women in the military. Because they weren't considered. And they were part of the Women's Auxiliary.
Right, so they were not
They were military.
But the United States forces at the European theater, they did at least receive, there was some type of recommendation there, I believe, which was just the general or someone saying, hey, ladies, you did a great job, and a salute, which was, I think, the only recognition that they received at all. Until 2016.
They received the first recognition in 2016. They were inducted into the U.S. Army Women's Foundation Hall of Fame. And then in 2022, President Biden signed a bill awarding them the Congressional Gold Medal. The nation's highest civilian award. So we still don't consider them
not a military. But Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams Early, she actually, because of her service and everything that she did during that time, she was advanced to Lieutenant Colonel, which was the highest ranking female officer at the time.
Yep.
Right. She went back stateside in 43, and then in 45 or 46, she asked to be discharged from her services, and then ended up as Dean of Tennessee College and continued her activism and education. And Crescentia Garcia, they found her in 2022, and she had actually served in the 6Triple8, unbeknownst even to her family that she had served. And she was discovered in New York, she passed away at 103 in 2023. So Oprah Daily did a news, a little. On the CBS News, and then in 2023 she passed away.
I believe it is American Veterans Center has a couple of interviews.
Oh, really?
On YouTube that I watched.
And then in 2024 there's a 6Triple8. Tyler Perry released a movie.
I haven't. Have you seen it?
I have seen it.
I haven't seen it. An amazing group of women.
An amazing group of women. And to think about, I know that during that time everyone made sacrifices, so not to take those away from, the tremendous sacrifice that this group of women made with no
acknowledgement.
No recognition.
Benefits.
No benefits. No.
It was a huge sacrifice for any of our military.
Right.
But you are in the military, and there are benefits that come with being in the military that women at this time are denied.
And they amaze me. Well, to all of the women who have served, and men as well, but specifically as we talk about this group of women and the black women that have served, especially in the 6.888 and those that came after, because of thank you for your service.
For your service.
Thank you for your service, and thank everyone for your service.
Yes. All right, and thank you for watching, and hope you come back.
I do hope you come back.